Happy Friday, friends. It's time for another Props from the Past. This one comes from the year 2014, which was 7 years ago.
So many years ago. I believe in August.
August of 2017. This was something I was building to deliver at Dragon Con. This was when we were way into Mass Effect. I was making a lot of Mass Effect stuff. Someone commissioned me to make the M98 Widow sniper rifle, and that's exactly what I did. Made it all out of pretty much MDF and PVC pipes. No molding or casting. Delivered this big heavy thing at Dragon Con. And I've actually seen the guy who commissioned it at Dragon Con with it several times since. So this one is important. I like it a lot.
That's so cool. Now, what Mass Effect was it from?
When did 3 come out? It's either 2 or 3.
Yeah,
I think. But a lot of the weapons go through all the games. I never used the Widow myself. Yeah,
you were kind of a hand cannon type
pistols.
person. There, you have some up on the wall back there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have Mass Effect on the brain because the kind of remastered trilogy comes out in May.
That's right.
So like next month.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to find time to play that.
Oh yeah.
At some point.
So anyway, we're gonna dive in, starting with a really great intro sketch. That's not me. Let's do this. So much production value.
That's really good.
Hello.
Really good. Not actually slow-mo. I'm sure you couldn't tell.
No, we faked it. So that was my twin brother wearing my Mass Effect armor. He's one of like 20 some odd people, including Mark Meir, who have worn that armor. In our driveway, filming up the driveway. I wish I had taken some behind the scenes of that. And he was pretended to be in slow motion. Then his wife Jamie wandered in the background. That was a lot of fun.
Everybody, it's Bill Duran here from
shirt.
Punished Props. Welcome to
Destiny
the
had
Pop
just
Shop,
come out.
and I made something really cool. You saw it in the intro video there. That was my clone, Rob, running around like a goofball with the M98 Widow sniper rifle from Mass Effect.
It still looks great.
And I'm going to show you exactly how I made it.
Excellent.
First of all, I have another MDF gun building
and I want to
video.
point out too, at this point, we weren't really filming full builds. This is probably one of our first full builds, and I'm sure I didn't film all of it, but we'll find out.
To take a moment to go check that out for some of the more detailed parts of the build. Other than that, let's get started. First, I drew up my blueprint in
good
Inkscape.
blueprint.
I made them full scale and had
some
them
of that
printed out
at the house.
full
Oh,
size.
printed out.
For the
Yep.
references of this gun, there's a guy on DeviantArt called TrueDon80 who has a whole bunch of reference images from Mass Effect.
I remember using a
I'll put
lot
link
of
down
these
below.
to make
Go
my
check
Mass
that
Effect
out
guns.
If you also want to
Yeah,
build.
this is someone from the community who went and ripped all the game assets and then rendered out orthographic views of all the different sides of each weapon and characters, armor. This guy, and he put it all up on DeviantArt. I remember gobbling all that up.
It was thanks to him that I had references for the Phantom.
That's right.
Because that was an enemy unit, so you couldn't really get close to him because it would stab you in the face.
Yep.
So just having those orthographic references was so handy for the costume.
Super helpful.
Your own Mass Effect gun. With my blueprints laid out, I traced them onto my MDF sheets in different thicknesses.
Man,
and
you
cut
didn't
them out
mold this,
using
did you?
a jigsaw and a scroll saw. These base layers form the center of the gun that run right down the middle. They were all layered and glued together using some wood glue. Then I traced the template shapes.
You can see there's like an 1/8" sheet sandwiched between two others. That was to get the thickness I needed. And a lot of the props I made back then were made this way. The Phalanx pistol I made this way.
Onto my MDF
Got your
sandwich
weighted down
and
Red
cut
Hook
them
bottles
out
full of sand.
really nicely with my scroll saw.
I did it
For
with the
any
scroll
interior
saw.
cuts,
I do see a bandsaw back
drilled a
there,
hole
but
with my drill press and then cut them out using the scroll saw.
There we go.
Any of the exterior edges that were still a little bit rough got cleaned up on my disc sander. And then I had to make all of these weird vent pieces on the gun. It was a little tricky, but once I figured it out, I had a pretty good process. First,
I think this was one of the, well, I guess there's stickers on the bandsaw. I was going to say, this is one of the first projects I used that bandsaw on. And we still have that little bandsaw. It's working great. It was like $120 new. And totally got our money's worth out of it.
cut out each of the vents all by itself using my bandsaw at an angle and I used the fence to make sure that they were all the same width. Each of these little pieces was cleaned up on the disc sander, and then they were all glued down to a
That's a lot of work.
quarter-inch
That is a lot of work.
platform.
Look at that.
The rest of these side panel pieces here were made in a similar fashion. Also
Feels a
cut
lot
from
like,
MDF using the
woodworking.
scroll saw. And then once they
I don't
were
think I
all
own a
built,
table
they
saw at
all
this
got
point,
these
though.
really huge bevels cut on them. Again, using that bandsaw at a 45-degree angle and using the fence to make sure that they were
That looks
all
great.
nice and uniform cut.
That's a lot like 3D modeling with primitives, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the process I went through. This type of work is exactly why I recommend people get a bandsaw. Being able to tip it to a specific degree, put a fence on there, and just zip through stuff to get super consistent cuts is so helpful for so many projects.
The handle is the only part that's kind of a little organic. So I used a chisel and then a rasp with an air-powered rotor bit to carve out all of the detail and roundness on it. Then I cleaned that up using my Dremel bit with a sander on it.
Lots
and
of sanding.
then the whole thing got sanded by hand, sealed with super glue, and then sanded down again.
Yeah, if you don't do that with
All of
MDF, it stays fuzzy. MDF drinks up any kind of moisture, which is annoying because you can have your props swell if they get wet.
Which happened to my District 9 rifle. Part of it got wet
the
and
Master.
it swelled up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, but like using something like super glue is good for that. I mean, they have like wood sealer you can get too.
Grooves in between all of these panel pieces were beveled a little bit using a file so that they looked all pretty once they got put together.
There you go.
Then I assembled all of the side pieces. They all got glued together with wood glue and they will be there like that forever. The rest of the finer detail pieces were cut out of a 1/16 inch styrene plastic using a knife and some pliers. They also got beveled with a little file and glued right into place. This thing has a
Really, what I was just doing was going through all the materials I had and finding the ones that had the correct thickness that I needed. And for thinner stuff, styrene is so good.
really big barrel. So to cut those holes, I wanted to make sure I did it first before I shaped the piece they went into, because it's kind of hard to drill a hole into an angled piece. So I drilled a hole into the layered sandwich of MDF, and then I cut out the angled bit on it so it looked really nice.
Order of
Once this piece
operations,
was all cut out,
very
it was
important.
ready to accept the giant barrel and get put all together. The end of the barrel has that bipod thing on there, so I found some couplers that fit right over the PVC pipe, and they look perfect, so roll with it, right? These were cemented into place after they were cut to length. And then the barrels had some holes drilled in them, and then they were glued together using some pegs to make sure they stayed nice and lined up.
Man, I'll tell you what, if I was building this today, I probably would still use PVC pipe for a lot of it, but I'd probably 3D print most of it.
And geez, like the slots, the symmetrical slots, you could maybe do on the table saw if you have a thick enough blade.
Yeah, that would be super quick. I was just thinking about how I will probably never make something like this that way again. I have new tools since then. I have new skills since then. But at the time, this was like the perfect way for me to make it. This is how I could do it with the tools I had.
The ends of the barrels, again, were cut from PVC pipe, but then the caps on them I cut from some PVC sheet. The PVC sheet was glued to the end of the barrel and then beveled on my disc sander before the whole thing was cemented into place using PVC cement. That actually melts and welds the plastic together.
Fantastic stuff. Also, the sheets of foam PVC that we have will adhere with that. It'll adhere to PVC pipe with that PVC adhesive. Makes sense.
Wonder how that works. How does that work, twin?
Science!
I made the legs for the bipod also out of...
My twin brother is a high school science teacher, so yeah.
that PVC sheet.
We have to use that clip again soon.
It's just great because like people who don't really think you have a twin are like, oh, that Bill cutting to himself saying something.
Yeah.
Magnets to the bipod
Oh, that's right. I
legs so
forgot
that
about that.
they will fall off
that's a
instead
smart-
of breaking off,
yeah.
since they kind of stick out there at the end of the gun.
That's
The
experience.
scope rails will-
Yeah.
Knowing that those would snap off.
Right,
Yeah.
knowing that the person who had it was going to carry it around at a con. And then if he can glue those in if he wants, for like the final display at home. But I thought that was a pretty clever idea.
Good for shipping too.
Along the top of the gun were done in a similar fashion. Again, layered MDF that was then cut with the scroll saw and then glued down into place. These sort of rail bits here were first pre-drilled with my drill press to get these little dots drilled in them. And then they were cut out just using a knife. All of these little doodads were then glued down to the gun body. For the scope, I needed these really specific cylindrical shapes. So I started by pouring some urethane plastic resin, and then I used that solid chunk of resin on my lathe to cut out these really specific, really nice contoured pieces.
Yeah, so while like right now we have a much more advanced shop, by this point, like I had a bandsaw and a lathe, like I could accomplish some pretty custom things. However, we didn't have a 3D printer at this point. We didn't have any of them until like 2015, 2016, I think.
Yeah.
It's just shocking to me to watch this and just think like, this guy doesn't know about 3D printers. Of course, I knew about them at the time, but we're in a different world now.
Like that. The body of the scope here was made much like the rest of the gun. Again, layered, cut, beveled, glued MDF sheets. These sort of knob
No
bits
footage of
up
that.
here
No,
were done
not even a
little bit
close-up of the
differently.
knob.
Again, this is PVC sheet, but to add this grippy bit on the edge of this knob here, I just sort of pushed it a little bit into the edge of the bandsaw to cut these nice.
And I gotta say too, like when we watch these old videos, we'll point out how we just didn't film a lot, and this one a little better.
Yeah.
A little better.
This is where I think the transition started happening with you doing the voiceover and then showing the footage. It just gets more and more footage, like
as time goes on. Yeah. Until the footage just completely replaced doing any kind of voiceover.
Yeah.
Grips. Now, because
But
this
I'm,
is from the future, it's
mildly
covered
proud
in
of this
hex
video.
bolts. So first I pre-drilled all of the holes for the hex bolts, and then I beveled the edge of those holes using a spherical Dremel bit. That was the last bit of fabrication for the gun, so the whole thing got glued together, and then began the long process of sanding and priming. I'll spare you the details, but it was a lot of elbow work. Did some touch-up work,
filler primer.
and then
less than it would be if it was
primed the
3D
whole
printed.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah, well, after you seal the MDF, it sands pretty well. So there's that to consider too.
Yeah, the filler primer works really well for sealing the MDF along with that super glue.
For painting, the base coat was a rattle can silver paint over the entire gun.
Where are you?
That's in the
that's
painting
in the
area.
paint room. Yeah. It's just there's nothing in there yet.
Yeah, it's cleaner than it ended up being.
Yeah, that's in our future basement shop setup. That area is going to be for our like storage for our like car stuff and our bikes and things. So it won't even be a paint area.
Right. I think the material storage is going to go there.
Oh, material storage?
I think, yeah.
Okay.
We have to play with our little shop models to figure all that out.
Then I masked off the handle and
This is
added
a fun trick.
Textured spray
Adding
paint
texture
to,
to
give it a little bit of
different
grip.
parts of your
then
prop.
I went over the entire
you can just
gun
buy
and picked
texture
out
spray
little
paint.
spots that might get.
So like we sprayed a textured spray paint on the handle and then sprayed black over that. Which worked out
Yeah,
really
because
well.
the texture is
Going on.
like a
And
mottled
I put a
marble
paint
color.
masking liquid on it. In this case, I used a latex-based
We
one.
did paint
Once
chipping
that
in
dried,
this
I went over the
project?
entire
Oh,
gun
man.
with this base color. It's a jet exhaust acrylic model paint. Once I was happy with that, I masked off the rest of the gun and sprayed all of the black
There we
areas.
go.
This was done
This is
with
before you
just
had
a black
all-clad
acrylic
paints.
paint. Once the whole gun was
It's true.
painted, I could
You're
take
using
all
the
the
Model
masking
Master
tape
ones,
off
I can see
and
'em.
start
Oh,
peeling
yeah,
off
look at
all
that.
of the masking liquid, revealing these really cool looking
Metallic
chipped
buffing
paint effects.
paints.
That's right,
below.
the metal
Silver coming out.
Metallized.
testers,
Really cool.
metallizers.
There's also some really cool decals on here, so I cut those out using a vinyl cutter. You could get vinyl decals made at some place like
I think we had done our
I laid the stencils
Kickstarter
on,
at this point, and that's
airbrushed
what
it,
we used to
and
buy
then
our
peeled it
vinyl
off,
cutter.
leaving these super nice and clean looking decals on the gun. These scope lenses were kind of neat. I found some acrylic mirror and these acrylic half spheres. I melted them together using an acrylic cement
Oh,
and cut them
yeah.
out, sanded them in place, and then glued them
That looks awesome.
into the scope. Then all
I love that it's a hemisphere. Like a scope wouldn't be that because it distorts everything, but it looks pretty cool.
left to do was to seal and weather this bad boy. I started by using some Tamiya weathering powders. These things are really cool and they're additive. You can kind of add layers on top of one another and they're a little more subtle. Then
I don't use those a lot. Usually it's just things I want them to look greasy and grimy as opposed to dusty and dirty.
Yeah, and it takes a lot to have those cover a giant prop.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
They're good for smaller things.
Like soot and dust What I do love is you may have a prop that's really shiny. If you want it to look all dirty and dusty, you use those. They have more of a matte finish. And when the light hits it, it really sells as like that part is dirty.
Yeah.
Because the light doesn't reflect off of it.
Clear coated the entire thing with a couple layers of a flat lacquer from my airbrush. And then I went to town with some acrylic paints and just dirtied the whole thing up like crazy. Mostly I just put on some acrylic paint, dabbed it around a whole bunch, wiped off what I could, and then scratched it up a bit with some steel wool.
That's cool. If you layer your paints, you have to be really careful about it because you can chew right through it. But if you have a couple layers of paint, you can just gently kiss it with some steel wool to scuff the edges. One step too far and you've gone down to primer and you're totally hosed. You got to paint the whole thing again.
Yeah, that's something you'd want to do a whole test on a scrap piece, like the whole painting process. Because but it's some paints are you put on too thin or like really thin, and just it's so easy to scrape it all off.
Yeah, but it can add a like really subtle edge weathering and stuff that looks so good.
Finally, I glued in all of my hex bolts that I picked up at the hardware store.
You can also see that I sanded the edge of those bolts to make them look a little bit weathered too.
And boom! It's done! Totally done! Check that out! There you go, guys. The whole gun build right there for you. It's really, really neat. I'm super happy
I'd like to
with
see
how
it closer.
Yeah. You guys like it?
Certainly not going to pick it up and show it
along the way.
To the camera
I have a whole bunch of
closer.
other gun making videos and tutorials, so check those out. And please subscribe because I do these things all the time and you don't want to miss out. Do it.
There we go.
Subscribe. I dare you.
That's it, everybody. I kind of wish I knew how long it took to build that, like how much time I actually spent on it. August 4th, 2014. Very fun. Well, that'll wrap it up. I really hope you guys enjoyed that look down memory lane. Somewhere out there, my buddy Brock is still sporting this thing, and that makes me so happy because I love how it turned out.
Do you think you'll ever use the latex chipping again in the future?
Lately, whenever I need to do that, I just use toothpaste.
Yeah.
And it's really quick and easy, and it washes away super easy. So.
Yeah, the latex, you really do have to give it like a bit of abrasive.
Yeah, you gotta really rub at it to get it to go away. And it has to dry, too. Toothpaste, you don't even let it dry. You just put it on there, spray it, wipe it off. Well, that'll wrap it up. Thanks again for the support, you guys. Can't do it without you. We really appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next week. Some more shenanigans from the shop.